Turn it up. Salma Auntie hands Mustafa the remote control with a frustrated scowl. I can't figure this thing out. I'm squished in the middle of the sofa between Hamid, Uncle, and Mama, as everyone crowds around the TV in the family room, waiting for the 5 o'clock news to begin. Even though it isn't even dark outside yet, after all the early morning drama at the Islamic Center, it seems much later than it actually is. I'm glad that the house has filled up with friends. After we came home in the morning, we quietly ate leftovers from the party the night before, which felt like a million years ago. Then we went upstairs to try to nap. I lay in bed trying to ignore the phone ringing constantly and replayed everything I'd seen that morning in my head. The words terrorist and go home kept flashing through my mind, and a flood of feelings, fear, anxiety, anger, clouded my thoughts. I am home. Where else would I go? A few hours later, Rabia rang the doorbell. She was holding a large white bowl covered in foil, and Salma Auntie stood behind her carrying a big tray. Put these in the kitchen, Auntie said after kissing me on the forehead. I remember that Salma Auntie always cooked massive amounts of food when she was stressed out. The bowl was filled with vegetable rice, and the tray held meat pastries. Imam Malik arrived with his family soon after. He had changed out of his pajamas into jeans, but the sadness and worry hadn't left his eyes. I could see it even when I tickled baby Sumaya, making her shriek with laughter. She lunged for me and touched my cheeks with her chubby fingers, like it was just any other day. The grown-ups settled into the living room and launched into a long conversation about the details of what had happened that morning. Their voices were somber as they compared notes, but at times someone would speak loudly in anger. While they talked, they drank the chai that Mustafa and I made and mindlessly chewed on tea biscuits and dried fruit and nuts. We all hovered around our parents, preferring to be nearby instead of playing in the basement like usual. I sat on the bench of my piano since all the other seats were taken. Shh, shushes Auntie. It's starting. Mustafa turns the volume on the TV even louder. Everyone quiets down and stares at the blonde woman on the screen. The same reporter we'd seen in the morning. We're here at the scene of a serious attack of vandalism and arson at the Islamic Center of Greater Milwaukee, the woman says. The camera pans through the destruction of the community building and then swings right to show the mosque. Somehow, the scene appears even worse on camera and almost unreal, like a war zone. I gasp when I see the images of the interior of the mosque, which is charred and almost unrecognizable. The once gold-trimmed panels are covered with soot, and the carpet is blackened. Imam Malik is walking through the mosque, pointing at the ceiling, which has been damaged by flames, and talking with a police officer who is then interviewed about the arson. We don't have any suspects at this time, but we are asking the community to please come forward with any information that can lead us to whoever committed these crimes. The officer stands stiffly and speaks directly into the camera. The reporter next asks Imam Malik questions about the history of the Islamic Center, and his voice shakes as he answers. And then, as quickly as it started, the story is over. The anchors switch to news about a rash of robberies in the neighborhood on the other side of town, and Mustafa turns off the TV, and everyone sits quietly with grim expressions on their faces. The police have been taking this seriously. Tayajan breaks the silence. I'm surprised to hear his voice. even though his face shows that he's very troubled by everything that has happened. He hasn't said much about it. Muslims have far more friends than enemies in this country. Some people don't understand Islam or are misled and fear us. But I'm getting so many calls of support from our friends and neighbors in this community, Imam Malik says. It's true, Hamid Uncle adds. Even with things like this, I'm still convinced there's no better place to be Muslim in this world than in this country. I think about what Baba said about Tayajan wishing our family had gone back to Pakistan and worrying that his brother wouldn't like our lives in America. But Tayajan, surprisingly, nods in agreement. There are many things about life here in America that are very good, Tayajan says, and I'm starting to think you may be right. I shift on the bench and my elbow strikes one of the piano keys. The sound startles everyone, who are already jumpy on it and on edge. Why don't you play us something, Gita? Baba suggests. It might help. When I look at him with surprise, he gives me a sly look. I hesitate and glance at Tayajan to see his reaction. He doesn't say anything and only smiles slightly. Did Baba already talk to him about music like he said he would? Go on, Mama pushes. It'll be good for us to take our minds off everything. I spin around to face the piano, glad to be doing something other than just sitting, listening, and worrying. As I run my fingers over the smooth keys, a warm, comforting feeling settles over my shoulders and moves down my arms. I flip through the songs I've been practicing in my lesson book and decide on Beethoven's Sonata No. 8. I take a deep breath and start to play, letting my emotions pour out through my fingertips. After the first few measures, I forget everything for a moment and feel whole again. In spite of what happened earlier in the day, I play as if no one is listening, basking in the richness of the sound. Finally, as I hit the last note, I remember that I'm not alone and turn around. Baby Sumaya squeals and bangs her toy on the coffee table, drooling with a big, toothless grin. But everyone else has tears in their eyes, even Tayajan.